Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to this second session of the Committee of the Whole 1. We'll be getting underway shortly and our special guests will be arriving in just a few moments. So I kindly request all of you to please take your seats for the high-level exchange with Pacific leaders on the Samoa pathway. May I also request that you turn off your phones or set them to silent mode during the proceedings to avoid any disruptions. Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, will you please join me in welcoming our special guest this morning, His Excellency Mr. Onote Tong, President of Kiribati, His Excellency Mr. Christopher Joboen Loek, President of the Marshall Islands, His Excellency Mr. Baron Divavese Wanga, President of Nauru, Mr. Hosea Varenj Bainimarama, Prime Minister of Fiji, His Excellency Mr. Enele Sopoanga, Prime Minister of Tuvalu, His Excellency Mr. Douglas Ete, Deputy Prime Minister of the Solomon Islands, His Excellency Mr. Henry Puna, Prime Minister of the Cook Islands, His Excellency Mr. Lee Tud, Senior Minister of Cambodia, His Excellency Mr. Sonam Tobden Ragbe, Personal Representative of the Prime Minister of Bhutan, the Honorable Mrs. Rosemary Edion, Chair of the Committee of the Whole One, and Ms. Shamshat Akhtar, Undersecretary General of the United Nations and Executive Secretary of the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it's now my pleasure to turn the proceedings over to the Honorable Ms. Rosemary Edion, Chair of the Committee of the Whole One. Madam Chair.
Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to extend my warm welcome to all the distinguished delegates attending the Special Body on Least Developed, Landlocked Developing and Pacific Island Developing Countries under the Committee of the Whole One. It is my pleasure to declare open the Committee of the Whole One. We shall begin by considering Agenda Item 2 on the Special Body on Least Developed, Landlocked Developing and Pacific Island Developing Countries. To begin, we will have a high-level exchange between the Pacific leaders and the Executive Secretary on the Samoa Pathway and includes 6 heads of state and government. May I now invite them to take their seats here in the front. Your Excellencies. Thank you, Your Excellencies. It is my pleasure to invite Ms. Akhtar to moderate the high-level exchange. We have set aside 1 hour and 40 minutes for this panel, which includes a brief period for discussion.
So first of all, let me say good morning and warmly welcome our high-level panel, but all of you also for being here for what is a second round of exchange since I joined ESCAP. As you know, this is called the Special Body on these. Oh, sorry about that. So this is called the. It's obviously the 71st Commission session, and it is the Special Body on Least Developed, Landlocked Developing and Pacific Island Developing Countries. And as you know, this is a very important agenda in the United Nations, but we have squarely tailored our efforts to support you all. This high-level exchange on Pacific priorities and Samoa pathway will be led by our distinguished, honorable leaders of the Pacific Island. Let me start by introducing you His Excellency Jose Veroque Benin Marama, Prime Minister of the Republic of Fiji. His Excellency Mr. Anote Tong, President of Republic of Kiribati, who's to my second right. His Excellency Mr. Christopher Loic, President of the Republic of Marshall Islands. His Excellency Mr. Baron Waka, President of the Republic of Nauru, to my left. His Excellency Anale Sopuaga, Prime Minister of Tuvalu, sitting second to my left. His Excellency Mr. Henry Puna, Prime Minister of the Cook Islands, who's sitting to the extreme left. So with this introduction, thank you, Chair. It is an honor to moderate the Pacific Leaders Exchange on Pacific Priorities and Samoa Pathway. My role is a very simple one. I will make some introductory remarks, but by and large, this is a dialogue amongst the Pacific leaders, and I will just kickstart with a few questions. Let me mention to you that I also would like to take a second to welcome the Deputy Prime Minister of the Solomon Islands and the Minister of Finance of Vanuatu, who are here as representatives of their respective leaders. I believe this is the single largest group of Pacific heads of state and government on any commission panel in recent memory or ever in the history of ESCAP. So I can tell you that all my staff that is present and not present here is extremely excited at this opportunity, and we look forward to our continued engagement in years to come. Distinguished leaders, excellencies, the third International Conference on Small Island Development States in Samoa last year, my first year in ESCAP, embodied in the Samoa pathway, called for urgent action to support and accelerate development, especially for the people of the Pacific. My meeting with Pacific leaders in Samoa was very useful for us to mutually explore ESCAP's role in support of our Pacific member states, and I firsthand heard and understood the dynamics of what was going on in the Pacific Islands. There's international community's commitment to support the Pacifics in unprecedented manner going forward. ESCAP has undertaken to improve support and delivery to the Pacific in 5 key areas, and let me outline these in more details in a minute, but let me first identify what these areas are. So the first is the climate change and disasters, which drives everything there, or destroys, as the case may be. Second is connectivity. Third is social inclusion and Pacific voice. Better data and statistics is the fourth area. And trade. Of course, Asia has a lot of intra-regional trade, but we would like to look at opportunities for trade within Pacific and in the neighboring countries. So let me just first outline a word about the climate change and disasters. The SIDS are most at risk to external shocks. Your leadership knows it more than I, especially natural disasters. ESCAP has mobilized new high-resolution satellite-derived imagery and damage maps, especially to support disaster response and relief in Vanuatu and Tuvalu. We are working with UNOSAT and the Secretariat of the Pacific Community, SOPAC, to streamline future use of space technologies for disaster management, and will conduct specialized training in Pacific countries to strengthen multi-hazard risk assessment and early warning systems. In support of the Samoa pathway, with assistance of potential donors, ESCAP is working on a new project to strengthen climate risk knowledge, build meteorological and hydrological capacities, and establish national multi-stakeholder forums in Fiji, Solomon Islands, Tonga, Samoa, Vanuatu, and Papua New Guinea. This is additional to our work with SOPAC to assist Pacific countries in operating national geoportals for disaster risk management, efforts with the government of Fiji to create a new South-South Cooperation Forum on climate resilient agriculture, and development of tools and guidelines to help integrate disaster risk reduction into development and financial planning. One of the 14 resolutions tabled and to be considered by the Commission in this session on strengthening regional implementation of the Sendai framework will expand the scope of ESCAP's multi-donor trust fund for tsunami, disaster, and climate preparedness to now also include our Pacific SIDS. So this is going to be another door opening for us to draw the resources from, because we have been able to mobilize some additional funding for this. Let me turn to now the second item where we are trying to strategize our support, which is the Pacific connectivity, especially in inter-island shipping. This is another key challenge. It is best addressed through sub-regional cooperation and integration. ESCAP has therefore initiated a pilot project to enhance maritime transport connectivity among the Pacific SIDS, and is negotiating funding support for a new project on maritime safety, which we will share at a seminar later this year in Fiji. Excellencies, I'd like to now turn to the third topic that I had mentioned, which will also be our focus. The voice of Pacific has been more strongly heard at the intergovernmental level this year than ever before in addressing social inclusion, and ESCAP has been pleased to support this work. A record 15 Pacific countries participated in the Asia-Pacific Conference on Gender, Equality, and Women's Empowerment, and under the strong leadership of His Excellency, the Prime Minister of Tuvalu, and thanks to him, the outcome is considered to be the most aggressive, pertinent of any region in the Beijing +20 review process. And of course, you need it. Pacific leadership also ensured a strong and concrete outcome of ESCAP's Asia-Pacific Intergovernmental Meeting on HIV and AIDS, with His Excellency, the President of Fiji, in the chair. And we are honored that His Excellency, the Prime Minister of Fiji, will be the first Pacific leader in 10 years to chair the Commission session tomorrow. So thanks to the leadership of the Pacific, you have a voice, you have a presence, and you will have our unwavering commitment with all other member states, because we are talking to them on a regular basis. It just takes time to galvanize action. The fourth topic is the better data and statistics that I talked about. When we met in Samoa, I made the point that a quick scan of ESCAP's databases showed that of the 169 proposed targets for the new Sustainable Development Goals, indicators could only be produced for about 36 in the Pacific, about 21% of the total. ESCAP has therefore been working with our Pacific member states to address some of these data and statistical gaps, which also aligns very closely with the Samoa pathway. One of the projects we have launched since the SIDS conference has been to support the Federated States of Micronesia, Fiji, Palau, Samoa, and Vanuatu in improving their ability to compile policy-relevant environmental indicators. Part of this work has been to assist with the implementation of the system of environmental economic accounting, the SEA, as we call. I can tell you that we not only have a statistics committee here at the ESCAP platform, but also a division, but also thanks to the Japanese assistance, we have a very vibrant statistical institute in Japan, which has been funded pretty generously from the Japanese authorities, which will also be working with your statistical offices to help in capacity building. Excellencies, the last item that I wanted to share with you is trade, on which we are going to enhance our focus. A highlight of our meeting in Apia was the signing of the new treaty on establishing the Micronesian Trade and Economic Community. And I know some of you really like that. ESCAP has now started work supporting the formulation of national export strategies for these members to pave the way for future roadmap to synergize trade strategies and diversify export commodities and markets. Market access has also been focus of our work on regional economic cooperation and integration, and we are happy to report that it includes experts from Micronesia countries and the Pacific Island Forum Secretariat, the PIFs, making contribution to our working group meetings. So recognizing the importance of regional value chains, we have also completed studies for selected Pacific countries to examine the benefits of accession to the Asia-Pacific Trade Agreement as a stepping stone to further integration with larger regional economies. If you know the resources with which we are working on these, you'd know what a big achievement this is, because we are doing more with very limited resources. And we could possibly do much more, provided we are able to mobilize what we have been trying to seek assistance for. So to conclude, I would like to say that this high-level exchange today gives me and my colleagues the opportunity to more closely examine areas of action, progress, and gaps in support of the Samoa pathway. We will continue to work with the Pacific's development partners to support our Pacific member states. With this, I close my remarks so that we could have more discussion involving the leaders. It is now my pleasure to pass on the floor to our Pacific leaders, and the way we will proceed is that I will ask that each of the distinguished panelists shares with us their thoughts on the Samoa pathway and the response in the Pacific by the United Nations, and of course to the extent that you are familiar with our work, ESCAP. So with this introduction to setting the scene for the panel, we will start with His Excellency Viroke Beni Maroma, Prime Minister of the Republic of Fiji. Prime Minister, we will also be very interested, besides the Samoa pathway discussion, to hear any insights you may offer into the potential for green growth approaches to support the Sustainable Development Agenda in Pacifics. I raised this question particularly given the successful launch of Fiji's Green Growth Framework. So, Prime Minister, you have the floor, and you can take 7 to 8 minutes or even more if you wish to. I thank you for being here again.
Thank you, Madam. Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Marshall Islands, Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Nauru, Your Excellency, the President of Kiribati, Your Excellency, the Prime Minister of Cook Islands, Your Excellency, the Prime Minister of Tuvalu, Your Excellency, the Deputy Prime Minister of Solomon Islands, the Executive Secretary, ESCAP, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Bulavinaka, and a very good morning to you all. I'm delighted to be given the opportunity to share Fiji's experience on the formulation of its Green Growth Framework, the first of its kind among the island nations of the Pacific. As we all know, the term green growth has been adopted globally to describe a path of economic growth which uses natural resources in a sustainable manner. But it has particular resonance in the Asia-Pacific region, where we know that development has far too often come at the cost of environmental degradation. The Pacific small island developing states are especially vulnerable in this regard, and we need to grow our economies in a sustainable manner without jeopardizing our pristine environment and the futures of Pacific Islanders to come. In Fiji, we recognize that much of what has been done in the past is unsustainable. In some cases, seriously so. In far too many instances, our resources have been exploited without regard for the need to nurture them carefully so that they can continue to provide the prosperity on which we all depend, now and into the future. My own government recognized that we needed to forge a new development model, one that is more holistic, integrated, inclusive, and above all, sustainable. We needed a new approach that links economic growth and environmental protection to build a green economy in which the driver of growth is more intelligent, more effective, and has a common interest of all citizens in mind. In June 2014, we held our first National Green Growth Summit in Fiji. And in opening that gathering, I had said we needed to be a lot smarter in the way we exploit our resources, whether it is our fish at sea or forests at land, so that we can extract the maximum income from them for our development needs, but still protect them so we can continue living off them. What emerged from that summit and was later endorsed by my cabinet was Fiji's first homegrown green growth framework, a master plan, if you like, to build a more sustainable economic model and have that at the very core of our national development. That framework is now in place and is central to everything that we do. Sustainability is now the criteria against which every national development project is measured. Put simply, if a project or initiative is not sustainable, and jeopardizes our natural resources in any way, it will not proceed. Because as I've repeatedly stated, our resources are not for us to squander in the present for short-term economic gain. We are merely holding them in trust for future generations of Fijians, and we owe it to them to leave them with some of the same resources that can eventually also exploit in a sustainable manner. It is no exaggeration to say that this is a sacred trust which must not be broken. There are, of course, many factors beyond our control, the biggest of which is the failure of the industrialized nations to curb their carbon emissions and give Pacific Islanders a fighting chance against the rising sea levels caused by those emissions. I will be saying a lot about this issue later in the week, but Fiji is at the forefront of the efforts of Pacific Island nations to get the global community to finally take this issue seriously, and we will be leading the charge at the World Climate Summit in Paris in 6 months' time. Today, I want to concentrate on those measures that we do have control over, and that is the responsible use of our natural resources, whether on land or at sea. The challenge we face from climate change was a central theme at the inaugural Pacific Island Development Forum meeting in August 2013. At that summit, ladies and gentlemen, representatives from the public sector, representatives from the public sector, from the private sector, and the civil society agreed that while we could do little more than plead for global action on climate change, we could at least build a degree of resilience among island nations. It was therefore agreed that the Pacific needs a distinctive sustainable development model, which we called green growth in blue economies. It recognizes that our current economic growth model in the Pacific Island countries is flawed. We all agreed at that gathering to do more than just discuss these challenges, but to actually implement a plan of action. And so it was that my own government saw fit to formulate a green growth framework to guide our future national development in Fiji. None of this, I must say, was done in isolation. We took into account Fiji's existing international commitments, such as those under the Barbados Plan of Action and the Mauritius Strategy, to harmonize our domestic approach with overall global objectives. But we realized above all that we needed to formulate a uniquely Fijian plan that specifically addressed our own challenges rather than adopt some generic international framework. We also realized at the government level that we could do little working in isolation. We needed to build a cohesive an inclusive partnership with all Fijians and work together to identify our common development challenges and develop a consensus on sustainability. So we brought together all of the stakeholders in our economy to a gathering in Suva in June last year to consider a draft green growth framework that we had formulated and covered a way forward together. We had a number of guiding principles. The need to reduce carbon footprints at all levels, improve resource productivity, including doing more with less, to develop a new integrated approach to national development with all stakeholders collectively working together for the common good, because and effective strategies requires harmony and synergy. We need to strengthen public education of responsible stewardship of our environment, to make people more aware of their personal responsibility to care for their surroundings. We needed to adopt more comprehensive risk management practices. We needed to audit both past and planned developments and link economic progress to better environmental outcomes. We needed to enhance structural reforms to encourage fair competition and efficiency. And we needed to provide incentives for investment to support the efficient use of natural resources. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I cannot stress enough the need to take all of our people with us on the green growth journey. Governments cannot work in isolation. Individual ministries cannot work in isolation. Indeed, we found that the government ministries not communicating with each other on development projects was one of our biggest problems. Without an integrated approach across the whole of government and the whole of society, effective green growth outcomes are difficult, if not possible. And so we need partnerships to deliver our development agenda. Partnerships with the private sector, partnerships with civil society groups, individual communities, and indeed individual citizens. At our National Green Growth Framework Summit, representatives from across society, joined by multilateral organizations and our development partners, considered a number of hotspots that require attention, and these were prioritized into 10 basic areas. And these include building resilience to climate change and disasters, waste management, sustainable island and ocean resources, inclusive social development, food security, freshwater resources, and sanitation management, energy security, sustainable transportation, technology and innovations, and the greening of tourism and manufacturing industries. Essentially, the development of sustainable activities in both these major national endeavors. The Green Growth Framework that eventually emerged carries the theme, restoring the balance in development that is sustainable for our future. This will keep Fiji relatively pristine and live up to our global image that we must work harder to maintain. Working together, we need to manage these hotspots, and that requires a partnership between all stakeholders in our society to ensure that our development priorities are rebalanced to meet our social and environmental objectives. Of course, it also requires political will from government to see these reforms through and to place them at the center of our national life. I'm pleased to say that my government has demonstrated that political will. The framework was endorsed by Cabinet in July 2014, and that framework will be a mainstay of a new 5-year development plan, together with a 20-year plan that my government is in the process of formulating to take Fiji forward. We are also engaging with our development partners, such as the Global Green Growth Institute and the Asian Development Bank, to support this process. Your Excellencies, I want to place on record my government's appreciation for the support provided by the ADB and the ESCAP on the formulation of our Green Growth Framework. It is a model that is not only appropriate to Fiji, but the other Pacific Island small island developing states, and indeed many other developing countries. But let me close by stressing one very important factor. Our Green Growth Framework is a work in progress, an evolving policy. We have started the journey, but we are by no means near its end. One of the biggest challenges we found was that the data we tried to use to decide our priorities was routinely either inconsistent or out of date. Put simply, we often had no benchmarks from which to work from. We needed more information on which to base effective decision making. So we have also embarked on strengthening our Bureau of Statistics and the other mechanisms at our disposal to give us the information we need to formulate sustainable development policies. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the path that Fiji has taken is a path that the rest of the Pacific can emulate. One might say it is the path that the rest of the Pacific has to take to ensure the sustainable development of its resources, in some instances, its very survival. Fiji stands ready to assist its neighbors to achieve some of the same gains we have made. Thank you for the opportunity to address you, and I wish you all the very best in these deliberations. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Adoption of green growth framework will undoubtedly nurture and keep Pacific Islands pristine, clean. That was the message, and I would very much hope that this will be sharing of the learning experience with other economies in the Pacific. Let me now, His Excellency Onote Tong, President of the of Kiribati. Of course, Samoa Pathway, anything that you could share of how you are proceeding on that, but also President Tong, as a recognized champion on climate change and action, we would also very much appreciate hearing your insights into migration and with dignity as a response to change that is hitting Pacific. So President Tong, you have the floor. Thank you.
I thank you, Madam Executive, our Madam Chairman, together with my fellow representatives of the Asia region, ladies and gentlemen, with our traditional blessings, come the Benamori, you will be blessed. The Executive Secretary has said migration with dignity as one of the aspects of climate change, and one of the related to one of the pillars that we are discussing today. Our problems of today are products undoubtedly of our never-ending quest for what we have been led to think as development, as progress, as a measure of well-being. But in our single-minded pursuit of these interests, we have done irreversible damage to the very source of all that has been made available to us, nature. For so long, we have been content to don the mantra of development, forgetting the nobler calling to be good custodians of this planet and responsible trustees for future generations. I truly believe that it is time for a revision of the international measure of good national performance, one that factors in the environment more seriously. Over the years, I have attempted to focus debate on the climate issue, on the issue of climate change, on people, on the human dimension. But of course, I have been criticized both within Kiribati and outside. I've been called many names: a fanatic, a scarmonger willing the end of the world. But do let me assure you that I am none of these. I have simply been trying to define in brutal terms the practical realities and the future implications of what this challenge means for the most vulnerable and indeed for this planet in general. It is a sad acknowledgement of our failure as custodians of this sacred trust. The next question is, are we now ready to act collectively to turn the tides, to ensure that the land of our people will not disappear, so that we will not become a people without a home, with a loss of identity and culture? Over the years, in an attempt to attract compassion, attention, I have spoken using many different formulations and terminologies, invoking such terms that I hope to draw the attention of those with the capacity to influence the unrelenting progress of climate change. Terms like a sense of moral justice, human values, climate equity. Of course, in moments of my deep frustration, I have resorted to use of terms like eco-terrorism. And of course, one of them has been migration with dignity, which perhaps I should focus my statement on. But of course, migration with dignity is a strategy which we believe will provide people with little else a choice when it becomes no longer tenable for them to remain on their home islands. And I can still recall the initial negative reactions to this notion, but I have always believed that in the absence of a credible and timely response by the international community, for we cannot do it alone, to the challenge of climate change, most, if not all of those in the most vulnerable countries will need to be relocated. But I believe we all would rather have our people migrate with dignity rather than to migrate as climate refugees. My people have never been ones to migrate voluntarily. Of those who went to study abroad, most returned home. Since the 1960s, many of our young men traveled to work on board merchant ships in Europe. Only a handful did not return. I cannot explain why, but there is a certain lure which continues to call our people back. When the New Zealand migration scheme, the Pacific Access Category Scheme, was first introduced, we did not take up our annual quota of 75 people. And it was only more recently, following greater awareness for the climate change challenge, that this exodus is increasing. And of course, I'm not surprised with this change, as we see heavy erosions of our coastlines. Coconut trees are falling into the sea, row by row. Seawater is encroaching into our freshwater aquifer, lessening and impacting on potable water resources, and of course, killing off our food crops. The weather patterns are changing, where spring tides are higher and have become more destructive. 2 months ago, Cyclone Pam struck with destruction Vanuatu and also affected Tuvalu and our two southernmost islands. While the impacts are minimal to us compared to our neighbors, it scared our people because it had never happened before and represents a new experience and a new threat for our people. Some of our communities have already had to relocate, and given the trend of more frequent, more intense weather events, these incidences will occur with greater frequency. Climate change is chartering a gloomy pathway for many people, and to prepare for the inevitable, my government places emphasis on improving education, to improve language proficiency, to upskill our people both academically and vocationally. The ultimate aim being to provide knowledge and skills that are marketable internationally, so that, as and when necessary, our people can migrate with dignity as worthwhile citizens into their new communities. We want our people to be able to integrate with empathy and pride because if they are seen as assets in their communities, hopefully they will not be treated with disdain and contempt and as added liabilities by the receiving state. But of course, as in most proposed solutions, this is another one that we cannot do it alone. On these issues of education and workforce skills development, we are working closely with our partners to raise educational standards from basic levels and are providing vocational training strength programs to gear our vocational training programs to international standards. Last weekend, we as Pacific leaders met with Prime Minister Abe of Japan to discuss potential areas of cooperation. There was a focus on people-to-people exchanges aimed at training human resources of the Pacific to cultivate expertise and better skills. In the Fukushima Iwagi Declaration, we agreed that a people-centered approach to sustainable development efforts in the post-2015 agenda. To me, these are all relevant to the strategy of migration with dignity. Forced migration is not pleasant by any means. In the current international news coverage these days tells of the tragic stories of those forced to flee their homeland for a variety of reasons, including the fact that their homes are no longer habitable due to environmental degradation. The climate change dimension of mass migration will only further complicate what is already proving to be a major international challenge in America in Africa, in Europe, even in Southeast Asia. And it cannot and must not be ignored. And whether or not there is any existing definition within the international language or the UN language, the issue is real and needs to be addressed. Migration with dignity may be an option that would offer a solution, and it may be worthy of consideration. To this end, I want to end by commending the theme of the 71st session of the Commission, as it serves to remind us the important need to balance the three dimensions of sustainable development: economics, the social dimension, and of course the environment dimension, from integration to implementation. It is important to maintain this balance with the perspective that people should be central, should always be central to our discussions, and most significant, the need to act now for the cause of the people we serve. Before I conclude, let me congratulate my colleague from Fiji for taking up the chairmanship of the Commission. And I thank all of you, in particular the Executive Secretary, for making this possible, where we can share our problems. It's always the problems we share, not the benefits. And let me, in closing, share with you all of our traditional blessings of the Maori, that are that more meaning, health, peace, and prosperity be upon us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, for bringing out the human dimension of the climate change, which is quite critical to us. And as you know, with the EU assistant, as I mentioned, we are working in this area. And migration has received tremendous attention in the international scene now, given what's happening for a variety of reasons in different pockets. And I think this will continue to preoccupy us for some time until there is effective multilateral effort to resolve this issue. So it is now my distinct pleasure to turn to His Excellency Christopher Loic, President of the Republic of Marshall Islands. President, as you have also been a recognized leader in the fight against climate change, including through your key role in facilitating the Majora Declaration on Climate Leadership, we would be grateful to hear your thoughts on the role of leadership in building resilience to climate change. With this, President, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Executive Secretary. You've already alluded to the fact that this is the largest collection of Pacific leaders here. And I think it goes to show that we realize that what's happening around the world that is affecting us need our collective efforts. We cannot cope with them alone, individually. Madam Executive Secretary, Madam Chair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to bring you the warm greetings of Yake from the Republic of the Marshall Islands. The international community has a challenging agenda this year in shaping a new development dynamic. As a low-lying atoll nation, a nation with no higher ground, the UN climate negotiations due to conclude this December in Paris are of primary importance. The Marshall Islands and many others are working to change the narrative beyond old divisions or finger-pointing and towards a common global instrument that not only captures our commitment now, but as a clear direction forward on upscaling future efforts. Every nation, the largest and the smallest, has a part to play. The Marshall Islands is preparing its own commitment to boost renewables and reduce future emissions, which we seek to announce next month. And we bring the same message broadcast by other Pacific Island leaders in our 2013 Major Declaration on Climate Leadership. That is, if we can do it, everybody can do it. This is a message not only true for clean energy, but also climate resilience. Here we need to move through not only every sector of government, but nearly every aspect of wider society. With an average elevation of less than 2 meters, this is a national security issue and one where repeated and growing disasters are stretching beyond the capacity of the national budget. In 10, 15, or 20 years, the global and national predictions are stark at best. Last year, I started a national climate dialogue to start to unpack these complex issues in our local communities. All of the paper policies to build resilience will do little good without the whole nation supports. But there I was faced with questions that have no easy answers. This September, leaders and ministers are also due to gather at the United Nations in New York to adopt the post-2015 development agenda and through it, sustainable development goals. This offers an opportunity for the international community to build upon the Samoa pathway for sustainable development for SIDS, adopted in Apia last year. And perhaps more clarity will be needed to draw close connection between global efforts through the SDGs, and our priorities as small island states. However, we must also work within our initial capacity. Within the SDGs and nearly 200 statistical indicators will easily overthrow our small nation with paperwork. A long journey starts with a single step, and our first foot forward should be to draw connection with our recent National Strategic Development Plan and the UN SDGs. On a national basis, we are now moving in the same direction as the international community towards performance-based budgeting, which uses indicators to measure progress towards milestones. In this way, the SDGs can be a positive opportunity for a small nation to make a large contribution. In addition, the SDGs are also likely to provide light on a critical pathway for many Pacific small island nations to dramatically transform our economies and societies. The SDGs are due to measure as a specific target the degree of economic benefit and participation of small island nations in sustainable fisheries. While our own national capacity for foreign investment and commercial growth needs our continued attention, it will also be the decision of distant fishing nations many of whom are also close development partners, which will bear the degree of success or failure of achieving this goal. For the Marshall Islands and many others in the Pacific, fisheries remain a primary pathway. ESCAP is truly the nexus for Pacific Island connectivity within wider Asian markets, but that remains much more of a theory than a reality. In this regard, I welcome the recent ESCAP report on Pacific perspective on fisheries and sustainable development, and strongly urge that further work be conducted to identify specific economic development strategies, and that also engage private industry and multilateral development banks. When island leaders gathered in Samoa last year, this is what many truly means by genuine and durable partnership for small islands. Our fisheries strategy is not at the expense of sustainable development, but instead conservation and island-led economic growth go hand in hand. Deeper and more focused arrangement by the UN on this issue is a first-order priority in the Pacific Island nations, and one where we can not only change our core economic indicators and not only work to break our cycle of aid dependence, but also make a clear contribution to global food security. Right now, we realize perhaps a US penny of benefit for every dollar in a regional fishery worth over $5 billion, but one dominated by foreign interests. As fish stock elsewhere around the world have collapsed, commercial pressure and effort in the Pacific Island tuna fishery has expanded. The parties to the Nauru Agreement and other Pacific Islands are working to change this narrative by introducing the world's largest certified sustainable tuna fishery. And this year, we have forged new agreements with the private sector. This is no longer just our fisheries initiative, but now one shared by all UN members and the international community through the HDGs. But to realize those in the wider Asian region. But to realize this hope will take the true commitment of distant fishing nations, including those in the wider Asian region. And finally, the UN NGDs will be an objective international standard to measure our shared success or shortfall. The UN Sustainable Development Goals are not only direct milestones towards sustainable economic development, but also show pathway towards improving all core social sectors and increased involvement in public life. The Republic of the Marshall Islands is pleased to have worked in partnership with UN ESCAP and the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat to initiate legislation, disability legislation. Human rights remains a strong national commitment, and as announced during our recent Universal Periodic Review at the UN Human Rights Council, the Cabinet has endorsed 12 core human rights treaties and protocols, which will be forwarded for consideration during our next parliamentary session this summer. With this, Madam Secretary, I thank you.
Thank you for that exhaustive overview. And as we all appreciate, challenges are multiple. I think the food security is something which would stay in my mind all along in this situation. And the more we do for the fisheries sector development, the better it will be. The challenges, of course, being a marine hub, protecting the fisheries for livelihoods of the people is quite critical. It is now my pleasure to turn to His Excellency Baron Waka, President of the Republic of Nauru. President Waka, I would also like to recognize your leadership in continuing the recovery of Nauru's economy, and would be very interested to hear your thoughts on the importance of strong national institutions for progress towards sustainable development. President Waka, you have the floor.
Executive Secretary, let me first commend you and thank you for your personal commitment to the Pacific Seas and your report on the many actions of ESCAP, actions ESCAP has taken to advance the dialogue that was started in Apia, Samoa last year. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank the leaders who have spoken before me. And my government looks forward to the support of ESCAP for the implementation of the Samoa pathway. Nauru supports the resolution on the implementation of the Samoa pathway sponsored by Samoa. Let me begin by just setting a brief background of Nauru's economy in recent times. I know that most of you around the Pacific will have noticed that Nauru had been in a very difficult state of economy. It lost everything. This is in the turn of the previous decade, and it just went down to nothing, and it was struggling all the way through. And with a number of initiatives that the government had put in place, reform measures, and especially a document which we still follow up to now, is what we call the NSDS, the Nauru Sustainable Development Strategy, up to 2025. That has been a roadmap, more or less, for us to follow. Excellencies, the economy of Nauru recently has taken a steep turnaround, and we have returned to growth and performed strongly in 2014 with a 10% growth rate, the highest rate in a decade for us. And of course, in the past, Nauru's economic base has always been based on phosphate exports. And phosphate is a non-renewable resource, as we all know. And the revenues from phosphate has been declining over the past years. Some of the changes that my government have pursued to try and broaden the economic base for Nauru includes maximizing of the economic returns from our fisheries resources. This is very, very important, as you know, that fisheries is a a renewable source of income for any island states. And so we have worked hard on this. And also we're putting in place necessary policies which are we view as very, very important in directing the growth of our economy, as well as legislations to maximize the benefits to government, private sector, small businesses and communities from the Regional Processing Center for Asylum Seekers, which was reopened in 2012. As you, as some of my colleagues will know, and some of you, that Nauru has worked on processing asylum seekers to determine genuine refugees for placement in a third country. And we are very happy to say that we have perfected that over the last 14 years, that service, and I believe that we're doing it very, very well. And so we're turning out something like 20 to 40 a month of determination. Also, other benefits related to the Regional Processing Center includes the introduction of a tax regime, and also introducing new visa fees, new custom tariffs and others. As you know, you have to be creative and try and maximize the return for government and the people. We don't just use the processing center as a money-earning venture, but it's something that the users are expected to pay the cost as they go along. Other benefits, the improvements to the transportation systems, such as air and shipping, and more with more capacity with the increased level of activity, business activity and economic activity. However, this puts a great strain on our infrastructure, and particularly our seaport, with the increased number of containers and ship movement. So, and in particular, where the system is designed for a lesser capacity. Another government activity, Madam, is that that has generated growth was a sustainable payment, substantial payments to landowners from final liquidation of the Nauru Phosphate Royalties Trust Fund. It is also a policy of government that in order that we maintain a steady and sustainable growth, that we need money circulating in the community and encouraging private sector to assist with that growth. So a huge amount of money has been paid out, and the good thing is people do use these funds as set up capital for their own businesses. So government assists along the way these small businesses, and some have increased their involvement and become serious private sector businesses. And also, during the time that Nauru was right at a very difficult financial situation, we also had lost a bank, and we haven't had a bank in Nauru for that many years, even through the initial initial stage of our coming back, but we are working on establishing that, and I'm glad to say that we will now have a bank set up in 2 weeks' time, and that'll accelerate further the development, the economic development, and we're looking forward to that. Also, very important is our economic growth is the assistance from our development partners, regional, as well as international organizations such as ESCAP. And we look forward to working closely with ESCAP in implementing the Samoan pathway for the benefit of our people. With that, Madam, I thank you.
Congratulations on restoring economic growth to the new heights, as you mentioned, and also all the associated efforts that led to it. I think it indeed requires a very strong leadership, so I'm sure you deserve a lot of credit for that. It is now my pleasure to turn to His Excellency Anale Sapuaga, Prime Minister of Tuvalu. Prime Minister, before we begin, we were together in Sendai when Cyclone Pam first hit. But on behalf of the Commission, please accept once again my as well as our staff's solidarity with the people of your country in the process of recovery. Cyclone Pam obviously had a considerable impact on the people of Tuvalu, as we witnessed through the television. We would also be very interested in your thoughts on how countries can, what we call, build back better to become more resilient to future environmental shocks, such as cyclones. With this question, Prime Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Ms. Akhtar, it is really a pleasure to be here with you, together with my colleagues from the Pacific, leaders of the Pacific, Their Excellencies, President of Kiribati, Marshall Islands and Nauru, and Prime Ministers of Fiji, Cook Islands. Also, I recognize there are other Pacific ministers around the room, my own Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance and Economic Development of Tuvalu, Deputy Prime Minister of Solomon Islands, and other ministers as well, Deputy Prime Ministers and delegations from the Asia and Pacific region. Thank you very much for your support. And in particular, let me say I'm very grateful to you, Akhtar, for your efforts to try to make the P in the ESCAP more visible as the A in the Asia and Pacific region. I really appreciate that. Thank you also for your comments on my contribution to the development or the implementation of the Beijing Platform of Actions on Women in the Asia and Pacific region. I was very pleased to be given the opportunity to chair the session here in this very room last year. And I must say, after that session, I stood for general elections. I got the support and recognition uncontested in my constituency. And I can feel it was largely due to the support of the women. So thank you very much for giving me that recognition. And now here I am, Prime Minister of my country again. Your support to the implementation of the Sustainable Development Pathway for Small Island Developing States in the international conference last year in Samoa that came out with the Samoa Pathway, SITS accelerated actions or plan of actions for the sustainable development is much appreciated. And I want to thank you and to thank the ESCAP for giving support to the implementation of that document. The document contains sectors of focal points that are so critical and important to small island developing states. So I appreciate the work of the ESCAP in that. And hopefully it can lead to the delivery and the implementation of sustainable development actions, and particularly with the support of the international community to small island developing states development pathways. But in response to the question that you have raised, particularly to build back after the destruction of Cyclone Pam, let me start by saying that Pacific leaders have just come out with a very constructive dialogue with the Prime Minister and leadership of Japan. And I must say, I personally am very grateful for the leadership in that process that recognizes the disasters and climate change as two of the top priorities for our partnership under the PALM process. I'm very grateful indeed also for the show of support from Japan as a clear example of durable and genuine partnership with countries, and certainly with the Pacific island countries. Cyclone Pam impacted adversely on Tuvalu, as other leaders have said, but perhaps not as devastating, comparable to our colleagues, our brothers and sisters in Vanuatu. But I must say, what came to Tuvalu was unprecedented and left the islands of Tuvalu heavily and seriously injured and devastated. The main damages that were inflicted on Tuvalu were to the lands, to agricultural vegetation, to food security, households, fresh water and sanitation. Infrastructure on the outer islands such as sea channels and ramps, which are critical when you are reliant so heavily on maritime transportation. To health clinics, powerhouses that provides electricity, generators and telecommunications are so vital to communicating and coordinating the affairs of the islands that are fragmented and isolated from each other. Vital lands, including whole islands that are inhabited, were heavily damaged, and some are still without food sources right now. Islets of the atolls that spread across the lagoons, although they are inhabited, we have lost about 5 islets to the destruction following Cyclone Pam. And this comprises lands that are so critical to the livelihoods of the people. And they are owned by the people. Now they have totally disappeared into the ocean. Madam Executive Secretary, we strongly believe in Tuvalu that these are the effects of climate change. And these will increase in frequency, we believe, and destructiveness. And these have been many times called out by people from small island developing states, particularly those that are particularly vulnerable, like Tuvalu, Kiribati, Marshall Islands, the Maldives, and many other bigger countries in the Pacific. And these, Madam Excellencies, have also been warned strongly by the world scientists, particularly by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, in its 4th and 5th reports, These have been warned strongly by these bodies. They have been acknowledged by world leaders. And now we are seeing this again happening in the Pacific and other regions of the world. And this time in my own country, we have seen unprecedented damages. We fear these damages are only going to get worse. Madam Chair, therefore, we want to build the message that came out quite clearly from the people of Tuvalu on the Out Islands. We want to rebuild. There is no way we are going to leave our home islands, our God-given islands. Please help us rebuild and restore. Now, therefore, we need to refocus our attention on helping the people prepare for these disasters. Perhaps, for example, in rebuilding, looking at the building codes, using classrooms, buildings, or infrastructures on these isolated islands as to build them stronger and better so they can also be used as refugee centers in times of emergency and disasters. We also need to coordinate better with our partners, with the world, so that resources and support are better coordinated. And I think that strikes me, and I want to emphasize this, is perhaps to look at how preparedness, the protection of these communities against the impacts of climate change. The situation is dire, the situation is serious. And if we are to help these people survive, we need to prepare them better. And I think on a global level, it is critical that we work towards a very ambitious, legally binding agreement that should come out of the Paris conference, COP21, at the end of the year. In our view, this agreement must be legally binding, demanding emission reductions by countries to levels that should increase the temperature not more than 1.5 degrees centigrade compared to pre-industrial periods. Because at that level, still we are experiencing adverse damages, serious damages to island countries, particularly those that are most vulnerable. Anything above 1.5 degrees centigrade will see these islands completely submerged underwater and seriously damaged. So this is a call that we would like to seek the cooperation and support of friends in the ESCAP region. We know the same similar implications would also mean for many, many of us in the membership of ESCAP. And we call that, whilst there is time, right now next week we are beginning negotiations in Bonn for the final text of the agreement. I seek the cooperation of ESCAP membership to please consult with your negotiators and push for this so we have a meaningful outcome in Paris. Anything lesser than that will not save the people, will not save our people, your people, my people in the islands as well. So this is serious. Yes, we are hearing very encouraging, positive messages about the global climate fund, the Green Climate Fund. But of course the problem here is access. We must make sure there is direct access for countries that are particularly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. And not only that, even if we were to have access, the absorption capacity of many of us will not stand to qualify and satisfy the conditional requirements that are often given with the funding that comes under such funding or Global Climate Fund. We have an idea, and I think options such as the Tuvalu Trust Fund in Tuvalu as a sink to sink these resources while you implement your adaptation at your own pace I think it's a very, very credible option that can be considered for utilizing and accessing these funds. Therefore, I would strongly propose that options such as the Tuvalu Trust Fund can also be taken into account. Now, another thought that came to my mind in accessing these funds is that usually access is based on the capacity of project proposals. I think this is wrong. This is moving away from the principles of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Access must be based on the principles and objective of the UNFCCC and based on the vulnerability level, not on the capacity of proposals, but vulnerability level and needs of countries. Therefore, we ask that we all work together and push such proposals in the final architecture for accessing the Global Climate Fund. It must also be additional and provide adequate and additional, not simply transferring the existing GEF funds or adaptation fund resources or bilateral and multilateral aid into this fund. Because climate financing is additional, is an obligation, is not an ODA. It's not a development assistance fund. Climate financing must be based on responsibilities and accountability and obligations as under the Convention on Climate Change. The culture of resilience that used to sustain our island communities is no longer capable of coping with the new emerging challenges, as we witnessed under Cyclone Pam. We therefore appreciate the help of the ESCAP in its project Climate Change and Migration that is being implemented in some of the countries in the Pacific, including my own Tuvalu. And we believe this project will help us understand and address the underlying attitudes and values that can fortify and improve our resilience as people and communities. Now, I strongly believe that the project has a future to help as well improve our resilience, and I thank the ESCAP very much for that project. We look forward to the final outcome of the project in offering our strength and our solidarity at national level and hopefully at regional and global level as well to address climate change. Let me say again, straight after Cyclone Pam, 3 days after the setting up of our new government, we went to all the outer islands to witness and feel the damages. It was shocking. Although we didn't have casualties, but the shock on the faces of the mothers and fathers and leaders of the communities was very, very sad, because they were totally unprepared to meet and address and cope such unprecedented damages. Their message to me was, do we have a future? Do we have a future in Tuvalu? And that is the message that I am bringing to the ESCAP, that we hear and recognize the plight that is faced by these people because of their vulnerability to climate change. Let me now say a bit about the Tuvalu Trust Fund, Excellencies. I think the Tuvalu Trust Fund is one mechanism that we can use to provide opportunities to help the people build back, build better, and again rehabilitate against the effects of disasters such as Pam. In our case, the government's fiscal policies, assisted of course by donor partners, the donors' budget support, have seen our revenue and expenditure become better aligned with our medium-term fiscal framework. And the balance sheet becomes stronger through a prudent policy for reserves that have created reasonably good buffer against fiscal shocks. Quantitative macro performance is accompanied by rising quality, combination of significant reforms plus steady improvements to our public financial management. And progress to date, plus the scope and capability to do even better, put the government in a much better position to cope with our challenges created by PAM than if it had weaker macro policies and lower capability for good performance of the public financial management. Excellence is the boost in fisheries revenue is also critical, very important and timely. We have seen bonuses, we have seen increases in revenue from this resource, which is providing vital opportunities for the island country. Therefore, the performance of the Tuvalu Trust Fund has been good, and it's been at the same time also raising expectations from the people, naturally, for government spending on services, on development, and also on rebuilding to the devastation of PAM. We also have witnessed, as I said earlier on, climate change and ocean acidification, which we believe will also impact badly on fisheries, and particularly on inshore fisheries. Coral reefs are impacted as well. So, as mentioned before, access to global climate change adaptation funds are notoriously difficult, especially for countries like Tuvalu. And therefore, hence our belief that our Tuvalu Trust Fund can be considered as a sink option to also help us with our absorption capacity limitations and so on, and to help us do our adaptation at a pace that we can handle. Therefore, we would like to ask that this can be seriously considered. Finally, Madam Executive Secretary, Excellencies, we are reviewing at the end of this year, by October, I think, our National Sustainable Development Strategy, the Kakeng Alua, and we want the ESCAP to partner with us, as well as other development partners. This is a good opportunity for us to collectively dialogue with our partners, with the communities in Tuvalu, as well as partners in the region, the Pacific, as well as the United Nations and other development partners, to see how we can take these small island developing states forward. And I would like to extend invitation to our partners to Tuvalu so we can dialogue on this. Let me also say that we have our report of the cyclone PAM that we are going to release or disseminate and discuss with partners soon, and I would also like to invite the participation of our partners. I close by thanking you again and also offering my own congratulations to Prime Minister Bainimarama of Fiji for taking up the chair of the 71st Commission of ESCAP. Thank you very much. Faftai.
Thank you very much for your, more specifically, the recommendations that you have offered. There are quite a few out there, and not only related to the temperature negotiations, but associated with this, the greenhouse gas emissions, but also in terms of the use of the Green Climate Fund and allowing membership the flexibility to deploy the funds more hands-on approach and not leaving it to the hands of, as I think you are mentioning, to the multilateral development banks processes. This one is going to be a tough one. But we shall absolutely communicate to UNFCCC. plus also the Green Climate Fund very soon, and also draw attention of the Secretary General's office to these things. Let me now turn to our last panelist, but equally important panelist, His Excellency Henry Puna, Prime Minister of the Cook Islands. I had the benefit of talking to your finance minister at one time. Very impressed by what you were doing. The Cook Islands, Mr. Prime Minister, has been very successful in progressing towards the achievement of Millennium Development Goals, besides looking at opportunities of the climate mitigation, as I had heard earlier. I would be, of course, interested in hearing your thoughts on your experience with MDGs, because that could help shape the region's response to Sustainable Development Goals, and also give us some thoughts as to how we can support Pacific Islands going forward. So, Prime Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Executive Secretary. And thank you for the honor of being here today at ESCAP and to be part of this high-level panel. My acknowledgement and congratulations to my fellow leaders from the Pacific for their most powerful and persuasive presentation on issues and matters that are so important to all of them. Madam Chair, may I also take this opportunity to congratulate and acknowledge Fiji, particularly for their green growth strategy, because in many ways it is reflective of our own pathway that we are taking in the Cook Islands. That pathway is based on two important principles. The first is the realization and acknowledgement that in order to live sustainably into the future, we need to work with nature, we need to plan with nature, and we need to learn to survive with nature into the future. Prime Minister Bainimarama has covered that admirably. And the second important principle is that we need to learn and to be conscious at all times that in exploring with nature and nature's bounds, that we need to be mindful not just of the present, but also of the future. In other words, we're not just working for the people of our countries of today, but also, more importantly, for the people of our countries into the future. And in line with these aspirations, Madam Chair, just a few words about what we're doing that I believe is very innovative and groundbreaking in the Cook Islands. First, we have adopted some very ambitious renewable energy programs and targets. We have made commitments to achieving 50% conversion of our energy from fossil fuels to renewables by this year. And I'm so proud to say that we have achieved that. 50% conversion of our national energy to renewables has been achieved as of 2 weeks ago. And we are planning and seriously working towards achieving 100% renewable energy by the year 2020. And I believe, Madam Chair, that we're on course to achieve that. And the second initiative that we have adopted is setting aside half of our EEZ of 2.4 million square kilometers as a marine protected area. The truth is, tourism is our main economic activity. It is the background of our economy. And we're looking at nature to enhance our tourism product. And that is seriously why we are doing what we are doing. So by the year 2020, ladies and gentlemen, we look forward to welcoming you to a very clean and green Cook Islands. At this point, Madam Chair, let me talk about MDGs. and the achievement of my country. I'm very proud and honored to say that we are one of the countries in the world that are on target to achieving all of the MDGs. Our journey was by no means easy, but it was a voyage of self-discovery and of learning, and we're still learning. We realized early on in our journey that we needed to incorporate the MDGs into our NSDP, into our national planning, and into the delivery of services to all our people. Our planning framework, from our National Sustainable Development Plan to sector and agency plans, are all aligned to the achievement of the MDGs. This is very clearly evident in the areas of education, of health, and social services. Notable successes for us are 96% literacy rate, 99.1% gender parity in secondary school, 100% immunization rate, 0 maternal mortality, 100% antenatal care coverage, 100% access to water, 97% with flush toilet facilities, and so on and so on. Madam Chair, we also recognized that achievement of the MDGs cannot be done by government alone, and that it had to be a collaborative and a collective effort with the private sector, with civil society, and with our communities. Furthermore, we accepted that good governance is a prerequisite for good development, and therefore we have adopted a 9th MDG country-determined goal, and that is for good governance. We are currently in the process of developing the next iteration of our NSDP. To date, our consultations with our people have shown that we need to expand our goals, ensure that our targets are the most relevant for us, and drawing on our MDG experience, our proposed goals are very much aligned to the proposed SDGs and to the implementation of the Samoa pathway, but with a Cook Islands flavor and focus. Madam Chair, we have 16 proposed goals, and some of these I'd like to mention are as follows. 1, to improve the welfare of all, reducing inequity and economic hardship, expand economic opportunities for all, improve economic resilience and productive employment to ensure decent employment for all. We want to build resilient infrastructure and information communication technology to improve the standard of living for all. We want to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, renewable modern energy and transport for all. We want to work on improving the health of all Cook Islanders and to promote healthy lifestyles. We want to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities. We want to accelerate gender equality and to empower and protect human rights for all women and girls, persons with disabilities, children, youth, and the elderly. We also want to ensure the preservation of Cook Islands' heritage, history, and traditional knowledge, and develop our native language, culture, local knowledge, arts, and creative industries. We want to strengthen resilience to combat the impact of climate change and natural disasters. We also want to promote a peaceful and just society for all and ensure that we deliver good governance in our country. Madam Chair, there are others. This seems like a lot of goals, but our consultations to date indicate that this better reflects our development aspirations and where we are in our development journey. The list of goals, therefore, Madam Executive Secretary, for SDGs do not scare us. Indeed, they challenge us and they actually excite us. They align well with our own proposed goals, and our goals will allow us to implement the Samoa pathway. The Samoa pathway is absolutely relevant to our own development plans and aspirations. I am convinced that if the international community rallies together to support the implementation of the Samoa pathway, this will go a long way towards the realization of the unfinished business of the MDGs and underpin the progress of the SDGs. Madam Chair, I am pleased that ESCAP is very supportive of the implementation of the Samoa pathway and the efforts that have been taken to date, as we had discussed in Apia at the SITS conference. We look forward to further engaging with ESCAP and your support in the post-2015 process and also with the implementation of the Samoa pathway. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Very valuable comments. Okay, sorry about that. Very valuable comments, and in particular, congratulations to you for setting out the targets for renewable energy and being on track. And I do know that you have tried to mainstream climate finance and tapped financing in an innovative way to make that possible. And also my congratulations for your achievements on the Millennium Development Goals, which lends us a lot of confidence, but it also is very instrumental that we draw and learn lessons for the remaining Pacific Island economies, because it will be really coordinated, coherent, and joint achievements which will turn the fate of the people. Sustainable development agenda is very rich. We have a lot of work to undertake in times ahead, and I can assure you that my team is definitely standing ready to support all of the islands as you deem fit, and we will definitely try to also work with our UN system to support you in your endeavors. So we have gone through all the leadership present here and heard them, and benefited tremendously from this in a short period. This tradition is absolutely vital for us because we want to hear your collective voice, because even though there are lots of common challenges, there is diversity and there is hope there. I'd like to now call on the Honorable Deputy Prime Minister of Solomon Islands to share his government's view on Samoa pathway and the United Nations and, of course, ESCAP's response. I thank you, Mr. Deputy Prime Minister, for being here. So over to you.
Distinguished heads of states and governments, Madam Executive Secretary of the ESCAP, Excellencies, senior officials, ladies and gentlemen, I bring to you my government's and my Prime Minister's heartfelt greetings to the leaders of the Pacific island nations. This morning. And thank you, Madam Executive Secretary, for the report on ESCAP's support for the implementation of the Samoa pathway in the Pacific region. Solomon Islands welcomes and commends ESCAP's support to the Pacific region and the role that it plays in the sustainable development of Pacific Island development states. At the outset, allow me also to extend my sincere appreciation to the distinguished heads of states of Kiribati, the Marshall Islands, Nauru, the Republic of Fiji, Tuvalu, Cook Islands, for your reflections on the Samoa pathway. The new international order in view of globalization and the many challenges confronting SEEDS poses palatable threats and issues diverse to the threats and challenges of the European Union bloc, Australia, the ASEAN countries, and other landlocked development countries. In this regard, the Samoa pathway may not be the ultimate answer forward, but it provides a sustainable framework for governments in the region to adopt and tailor-make the spirit of true partnership approach to the sustainable development in our unique, vulnerable situations, with the backing of political will on key issues affecting the SEEDS. Beyond the horizons of 2015 is a history of unachieved MDGs for Solomon Islands in many respects. However, looking forward is a tectonic shift in the approaches to tackling sustainable development goals, and the Samoa pathway is that quake that will aggravate the SEEDS to address the many challenges our countries face today, not only to achieve the post-2015 agenda, but also instituting drastic policy changes in our respective countries on women in politics, women in government, child labor, the alleviation of poverty, reducing trade imbalances, instituting living and equitable wage structures, workplace democracy, creating jobs, liberalizing the laws pertaining to foreign direct investment in our countries, the proposition of creating a Pacific Foreign Sovereign Fund, the proposition of establishing investment in infrastructure, in trade within the Pacific Rim, a regional cooperation approach to disaster risk reduction, early warning system, climate adaptation programs, aggravating the improvement of clinical health care, public health, providing delivery of services to which will reach the rural sector, and so forth. Madam Moderator, Solomon Islands is a least developed country, a siege and a post-conflict country at the same time. The challenges of tomorrow of a narrow-based economy, vulnerability to external economic shocks, and to climate change and natural disasters, and heavy dependency on imported fossil fuels are a very familiar aspect to us. And in addressing these challenges, inclusivity, peace building, and state building are core fundamental considerations. My government is a new one, elected in December of 2014, pledges to impute these goals with other platforms and protocols, specifically the Samoa pathway, into our 2015-2020 comprehensive policy framework. For Solomon Islands, the issue of climate change, ocean and fisheries, energy and disaster risk reduction and increasing resilience will remain prominent in our sustainable development process. Solomon Islands' future lies in investment to develop our productive capacities and addressing supply-side constraints, the renewable energy, our agricultural and ecotourism. Underscoring all of this is our resolve to build a resilient society and henceforth graduate out of our LDC status, a word that is prejudiced and segregatory in nature of development, and a post-mortem ideology unfit for partnership and diplomacy. Madam Moderator, we want to use the word developing country. Climate change remains the greatest challenge of our time and continues to threaten sustainable development gains made. International action to address our challenges remain inadequate as emission of greenhouse gas continue to rise globally at an alarming rate. Solomon Islands therefore calls for urgent global action to reduce GHGs and further underscores the vulnerability of small island development states to the adverse impacts of climate change and natural disasters. Our economy is largely dependent on our natural resources, both from the land and the sea, and as such, I believe that the path of green growth and the integration of green growth principles into our macroeconomic planning must be seriously pursued to ensure the protection of our fragile biodiversity and ecosystems and the continuation of benefits that we intend to receive from a healthy environment. And in that respect, we acknowledge the contribution of the Prime Minister of Fiji on the green growth approach, and we will learn from Fiji on this respect to impute in the Solomon Islands GG framework policy. Ocean and fisheries also plays an important role in our island economies and seas, and can benefit from improved health and productivity of ocean through adequate ecosystem-based management and the promotion of an ocean-based economy. One of the fundamental questions here is how can small ocean states such as Solomon Islands and the Pacific Island countries get the best value for their economic and fisheries resources, which in turn could finance our sustainable development goals. In the case of Solomon Islands, we are a member of the parties to the Nauru Agreement, but the vessel day scheme model is still debated today in the academic arena and the mainstream media as allegedly unsustainable because of the transferable quota is not based on fish stock, but is based on days. And this provides for an unsustainable approach to tuna in the Pacific Ocean. That, in my government, is something we are still looking at. In this respect, the international community ought to be vigilant in not disproportionately transferring the burden of conservation and management of marine resources to seas, while at the same time effectively tackling global threats on oceans such as acidification, We have worked very hard to ensure that SEED's priorities features prominently in the SEEDs, and I believe we have achieved that. The lifeblood of the successful implementation of the Samoa pathway and that of the SDGs and the post-2015 development agenda is the means of implementation and partnership. Genuine and partnerships are espoused in the theme of the third SEEDS conference. The current financing for development and the post-2015 development agenda process presents us with that opportunity. Solomon Islands hold the view that these two tracks ought to be collapsed and destroyed to become one integrated process such that the financing of development will effectively become the means of implementation for the post-2015 development agenda. Madam Moderator, in the spirit of the theme of the Samoa pathway, which is the sustainable development of SEEDS to the genuine and durable partnership, Solomon Islands continues to call upon ESCAP's continuing support for the priorities of the Samoa pathway, particularly in strengthening national sustainable development planning process. Also, in view of the current process of the post-2015 development agenda, to continue support for the effective localization of the SDGs and the post-2015 development agenda to country-specific contexts through the implementation of initiatives that are transformative and game-changing, and to enhance national capacities for effective monitoring and evaluation, specifically improvement of data and statistics and resource mobility. Madam Moderator, I share these thoughts with you in the spirit of a true Solomon Islander and a true Pacific Islander. I thank you so very much, Madam Chair.
I thank the Deputy Prime Minister for his perspectives and views. I'd like to recognize the Minister of Finance from Vanuatu to share, and also to invite him to share his government's views on the Samoa pathway and, of course, the UN's and ESCAP's response. So, over to you, Mr. Minister. Are you ready? No?
Sorry, thank you. I wasn't know the way that I will be doing it this morning, so can I have my 10 in the afternoon if it's possible?
Anytime. I'm sorry for this glitch because I was advised that you had heads up, but that's perfectly okay. I would like to also explore if anybody else would like to comment or raise question to the panelists. We have some minutes, but before I do that, I'd like to call on Semi to have a women voice from Samoa, because we've had all male speakers here. It would be great, and I would like to reiterate the call to the leadership that please try to have some more women in your group, colleagues. It always is nice to blend the voice with gender balance. So, Semi, over to you.
Excellencies, Presidents, Honorable Prime Ministers, Deputy Prime Ministers, and Ministers from the Pacific, as well as Madam Executive Secretary. I acknowledge the opportunity that's been given to the delegation from Samoa to report to our leaders on what has transpired since the beginning of the officials levels meeting. The high-level panel today aptly presents a valuable opportunity to further explore avenues to strengthen ESCAP program support for the Samoa pathway and to have dialogue with the extended Asia-Pacific region on sustainable development in the Pacific. In this regard, I am happy to report that as of yesterday, we were able to have the resolution that was co-proposed by Samoa and Fiji endorsed by the Resolutions Committee and will be provided to the Commission session. And the resolution is titled The Implementation of the SIDS Accelerated Modalities of Action, or the Samoa Pathway. It calls on ESCAP and the United Nations system to fulfill the main functions mandated by the Samoa Pathway for regional commissions, namely assisting Pacific Island members and associate members upon request to enhance national capacities and institutions, enhancing the Pacific voice and representation in regional and global processes, and ensuring the realization of a transformational strategy for the sustainable development of small islands, developing states, by strengthening the role of the Commission in monitoring the follow-up to the Samoa Pathway and the post-2015 development agenda. As of yesterday as well, Samoa was able to provide a presentation on behalf of the SIDS group to the preparatory meeting for the special body today. And I would like to conclude my brief statement by quoting from the statement delivered by my Prime Minister at the conclusion of the SIDS conference last year. And I quote, "I hope you will leave here with a sense of what it feels like to be a small island developing state in a global arena of competing priorities and demands, where those with the resources and the influence emerge the winners. I hope, too, that you had a chance to see how we celebrate our cultures, to fully appreciate how interwoven our lives, economies, and societies are with our environment. And we will continue to look to the UN system and ESCAP to continue to add to our voice and to work with us through a genuine and durable partnership for sustainable development. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for adding your perspectives and also for that very famous quote, which I remember quite distinctly, that Prime Minister had echoed in Samoa. I see our distinguished ambassador from Bangladesh raising a flag, but I was going to call you on you in any case. You are also leading the dialogue on blue economy, given Bangladesh is such a strategic country within our countries of special needs, and also the fact that it is home to a large population base. So it's a great contrast to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Executive Secretary. Distinguished Honorable Presidents and Prime Ministers of SID states, distinguished Deputy Ministers and Honorable Ministers, and senior representatives from SIDS countries, and our fellow ESCAP members. First of all, Madam Chair, I would like to congratulate you for organizing this high-level discussion, this panel on the Samoan pathway. This is an extraordinary initiative on your part, and I think that bringing the SIDS issue in the mainstream of the ESCAP agenda, particularly in the year when we discuss sustainable development and its implementation, just prior to the New York summit, is very significant, and I congratulate you for that effort. I will also want to congratulate all your excellencies for all the excellent, very stimulating and very inspiring panel discussion and original thoughts that you have presented throughout this morning, including some of the very innovative ideas, the Honorable Prime Minister of Fiji, green growth, and renewable energy. Some of you have achieved 99% literacy, and many of the achievements, it was wonderful listening to all of you. Bangladesh is present here today also to demonstrate how closely we hold the 52 SIDS of this world, but particularly those most vulnerable ones in the Pacific. Fellow members and observers of ESCAP, even closer to our heart. Madam Chair, Bangladesh attaches high importance to the Samoa pathway for SIDS as a very inspiring and exemplary pathway or a roadmap for creating environmentally and economically sustainable, resilient and inclusive growth for not only the SIDS, but also for many climatically and structurally vulnerable nations with large populations such as Bangladesh. We remain committed to supporting all efforts of the SIDS as a force of advocacy for the SIDS towards implementation of the Samoa pathway towards sustainable development and a resilient and inclusive growth in the Pacific. One may wonder what challenges can possibly be common between Bangladesh and the SIDS. A low-lying littoral state in the Bay of Bengal and a highly populated LDC with a number of geographic and structural disadvantages, Bangladesh shares significant common interests and challenges with the group of small island developing states, particularly in the areas of climate vulnerability, global sea level rise, vulnerability to natural disasters, growing populations, creating livelihoods and productive human resources, and food security, and of course ensuring sustainable use of our marine resources for inclusive growth of our people. Bangladesh therefore has been working closely with many of the Pacific SIDS at the Climate Vulnerable Forum and also in tandem with UNOHRLLS and other member states as part of an informal advocacy platform and partnership on key issues of common interest: coastal and marine resources, biodiversity, energy and communication, land resources and food security, trade diversification, and exploring renewable energy. We firmly believe that the SIDS, which are well recognized in major international conferences outcomes, including the Rio +20 and the open-ended working group on SDGs, as well as in the Samoa pathway, are highly disadvantaged and vulnerable in their development process and require special support from the international community. We particularly express our full solidarity and empathy with the challenges and existential threats and climate change poses to the SIDS, as also to some of the low-lying coastal countries like Bangladesh. Like the SIDS, more than 30 million people in Bangladesh face the challenge of climate change in their daily lives and livelihoods, which threatens to jeopardize a significant share of our GDP and roll back precious development gains. We need to work together to transform these challenges into inclusive growth opportunities in the post-2015 development era. At the regional level, Bangladesh will continue to work closely with the Pacific SIDS under South-South partnerships, such as that exemplified by the Climate Vulnerable Forum, in our joint effort to meet these challenges. At a global level, arriving at a robust framework on adaptation and mitigation within the UNFCCC, as also within the post-2015 development agenda by the end of this year is critical. We will work together in Bonn and in Paris, I assure you, Excellencies. Many of the seats are also LDCs. These countries represent around 2/5 of the UN membership. As the indicators and the implementation aspects of the post-2015 agenda are finalized, the special challenges and vulnerabilities faced by the SIDS, LDCs, and the landlocked countries, developing countries, need to be appropriately and adequately reflected across the agenda. This is particularly with regard to poverty alleviation, inclusive industrialization, development of resilient infrastructures, and disaster risk management, sustainable use of water, food and energy security, conservations of the oceans and seas, and biodiversity. Given the intense challenges faced by the SIDS and LDCs, the means of implementation of the Samoa pathway, as well as the SDGs, will be critical, an aspect which is underscored clearly in the Samoa pathway. Our countries with special needs require not only predictable financing from the international community, but also access to financing, as mentioned by some of your Excellencies. But we also need to develop an access to adaptive, light-changing technology, and extensive building of productive capacities. Bangladesh has also been privileged to work with the SIDS in a special relationship, including the open-ended working group on SDGs on the issue of blue economy. As a littoral state with a huge population, we believe that there exists a great partnership opportunity here for extensive sharing of our knowledge and capabilities with the SIDS for conservation, utilization, and exploration of resources around our seas and oceans, but also to create an inclusive growth and livelihoods based on oceans and marine resources. Bangladesh highly regards the work done by the Pacific Island countries since Rio+20. In fact, it is the Pacific Island countries and not Bangladesh who have taken the leadership at the Rio+20 to introduce the green growth as well as the blue economy concept. And we've been working with the SIDS closely since then to mainstream the oceans economy into the global development agenda. Our delegation in New York has worked closely with the SIDS delegation to successfully include the subject of conservation of marine resources as a standalone goal, as Goal 14 in the SDGs. As part of our humble efforts to promote blue economy as an integral part of sustainable development and inclusive growth, Bangladesh is hosting a high-level panel discussion on the subject tomorrow at 5 p.m. at Conference Room 4. We would be highly, highly honored if some of your Excellencies please come and attend that session. I would also like to take this opportunity to invite everyone present here, all the SIDS and Pacific Island states who are present here, to come to that event. It's a 1 hour, 15 minutes event. But more importantly, we thought that it will be a potent time to bring this agenda and mainstream it under the ESCAP's umbrella. And here we seek the support of the Madam Executive Secretary, as well as we look towards participation and involvement of the IUCN and the UNEP in this work. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that. And let me see if there's anybody else before we close this session. Well, if nobody, I'd like to personally thank the leadership for being here of Pacific in a united force, united voice. And we heard a lot of common challenges, but we also heard how opportunities are being harnessed and what achievements have been made despite enormous challenges, and most of all, the economic, social resilience that Pacific Island has acquired, at least. But we also know that the region remains vulnerable, so it's our joint effort to work to convey the message at the climate summit in Paris that the world needs to get together to take very forceful, solid action against the drivers of climate change, because it's incredible what's happening all over the world in this on this score. I can assure you that this is a beginning, of course, of long-term relationship. We started with Samoa Pathway, at least at my level. My colleagues have been working before that also to help out SIDS, but I think the focus that Samoa Pathway has brought, as was mentioned by everybody, is incredible, and it is incumbent on us, a United Nations system, but we take it as our responsibility at the Regional Commission level to continue to strive to have a focused voice of our countries with special needs. And I hope you will get time to read the publication that our colleagues have put together on countries with special needs. This is a flagship that we have introduced this year in a more cohesive manner, and we hope to maintain this tradition of a very focused publication that could draw attention of the public at large and global as well as regional on our countries with special needs that are quite large. So with this, with your permission, I'd like to conclude this session and request you to show a big hand of applause with a lot of sound to thank our leadership. Somebody has got to make an announcement, I guess. Okay, while somebody is making an announcement, let me also express my special thanks to my ESCAP team that worked pretty hard to get this event in order, and also Yusufa, who comes from Suva, especially to attend the commission as well as this session. His efforts are quite obvious in terms of getting the right leadership here. Thank you so much to all my team members.
Thank you very much, Ms. Akhtar, and the distinguished heads of state and government for a very insightful and very encouraging, fruitful exchange of ideas on a very important topic, the Samoa Pathway. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, as you know, during yesterday's preparatory meeting, the LDCs, LLDCs, and PIDCs had a full day of extensive discussion of the main issues, concerns, and priorities of these three groups of countries. and at the conclusion of those deliberations, the meeting requested its chair to present a summary to this committee. I would therefore like to request Mr. Philemone Wangabata, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Finance of Fiji, to present the main outcomes of the meeting. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Marshall Islands, Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Nauru, Your Excellency, the President of Kiribati, Your Excellency, the Prime Minister of Cook Islands, Your Excellency, the Prime Minister of Tuvalu, Your Excellency, the Prime Minister of the Republic of Fiji, Your Excellency, the Deputy Prime Minister of Solomon Islands, distinguished heads of delegations, Madam Executive Secretary, Madam Chair of Committee of the Whole One, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It was a great honor to have been elected the chair of the preparatory meeting of the special body on the LDCs, LLDCs, and SEEDs, which deliberated on development issues of importance to the three groups of countries yesterday. I am grateful to the member countries of the group for having confidence in Fiji to chair the session, and to the co-chairs and rapporteur for the assistance extended to me, as well as the Secretariat for the support provided. I am pleased to present my chair's summary of the deliberations of the consideration of the special body. Participants reviewed and discussed development issues relevant to the Pacific, island developing countries, least developed countries, and landlocked developing countries as contained in the documents of the sessions. The participants noted with appreciation the high quality of these documents and endorsed the recommendations contained therein. Participants decided that the chair's summary be brought to the attention of the special body to contribute to its deliberations on sustainable development challenges facing the LDCs, LLDCs, and SEEDs in the Asia-Pacific region. On development issues, Madam Chair, the meeting highlighted the diversity among and between LDCs, LLDCs, and SEEDs, which should be taken into consideration in shaping development strategies and programs for these countries. It emphasized the need for strengthened partnership in supporting the implementation of the international programs of action and the sustainable development of LDCs, LLDCs, and SEEDs. It also placed special emphasis for Asia-Pacific countries with special needs to have access to a variety of financial services and products in support of their sustainable development. The meeting noted the recent disasters in Nepal, Vanuatu, and Tuvalu, and called for timely assistance of the international community in supporting the recovery of these countries. In view of the vulnerability of LDCs, LLDCs, and SEEDs to natural disasters, the meeting requested the Secretariat to support in building capacity on disaster risk reduction and reconstruction after disasters. The meeting stressed the need for putting the challenges and priorities of the countries with special needs at the front and center of the post-2015 development agenda. Madam Chair, on Pacific Island developing countries, the meeting expressed its gratitude to the Government of Samoa for the successful hosting of the third international conference, Small Island Developing States, that was held in Apia in September 2014. It noted the guidance that the Samoa Pathway provides to regional commissions to support its implementation, namely, 1, to enhance national capacities and institutions through the United Nations, country teams in cooperation with national agencies and intergovernmental organizations. Secondly, to enhance the Pacific voice through sub-regional, regional, and global processes. And thirdly, to monitor the full implementation of the Barbados Program of Action, the Mauritius Strategy, and the Samoa Pathway. The meeting called on the Secretariat to support member countries in promoting competitiveness and diversification in the Pacific, maintaining environmental resilience, and addressing growing inequalities. It recognized the importance of the Samoa Pathway to sustainable development and requested the Secretariat to assist member countries in its implementation. Madam Chair, on landlocked developing countries, the meeting noted that the development of LLDCs remain constrained by remoteness and high transit costs, as well as volatile growth due to commodity dependence, and also took note of the second UN conference on LLDCs, which was held in November 2014 in Vienna, Austria, and the new Vienna Program of Action for LLDCs for the decade 2014 to 2024. The meeting noted that a meeting on the follow-up to and implementation of the Vienna Program of Action will be held in Zambia in June 2015 and encourage active participation of member countries. It noted the commitment of the member states to timely and effective implementation of the Vienna Program of Action. The meeting welcomed the proposed regional roadmap for implementing the Vienna Program of Action contained in document E/ESCAP/71/2 and noted and agreed with the revisions suggested during the discussion on that document. The meeting noted that the commodity dependence of LLDCs exposes them to volatility in the global commodity markets and that these countries need to diversify their economies in terms of products and of export markets. Madam Chair, on least developed countries, the meeting expressed appreciation to the government of Cambodia for hosting the high-level policy dialogue on the implementation of the Istanbul Program of Action in Siem Reap, Cambodia in March 2015, which adopted the Siem Reap Anchor Outcome document. Among other things, it emphasized that despite some progress, LDCs continue to face many challenges, such as pervasive poverty, serious structural impediments to growth, low levels of human development, and high exposure to shocks and disasters. In noting the challenges, many LDCs had expressed the intention to meet the graduation criteria by 2020 and called on the UN and development partners to support the LDCs in formulating comprehensive graduation strategies based on their specific situation. The meeting noted that the second half of the implementation of the Istanbul Program of Action will happen within the framework of the Sustainable Development Goals and stressed that this opportunity should be seized by Asia-Pacific LDCs. The meeting noted the continuous commitment of development partners toward the effective and timely implementation of the Istanbul Program of Action. Madam Chair, on key challenges and prospects for Asia-Pacific countries with special needs, the meeting noted with appreciation the report prepared by the Secretariat entitled Asia-Pacific Countries with Special Needs Development Report 2015, Building Productive Capacities to Overcome Structural Challenges. As a core thrust, building productive capacities and diversifying their economies are critical for countries with special needs in the Asia-Pacific region to benefit from greater integration into regional and global economies, to increase resilience to shocks, to sustain inclusive and sustainable growth, as well as poverty eradication, to achieve structural transformation, and to generate full and productive employment for all. The meeting noted that an environment conducive to private sector activities is critical for an easier transition to a more diversified economy. In this process, it is essential to strengthen national institutions and good governance in order to provide a stable economic environment. Similarly, monetary policies also play a supportive role in increasing productive investments in new sectors. Favorable credit conditions for productive sectors and for the promotion of new economic activities in particular are helpful for job creation and diversification. A competitive exchange rate plays a critical role in promoting tradables and the emergence of new economic sectors. On draft resolutions, Madam Chair, the meeting noted with appreciation the draft resolution on the implementation of the Samoa pathway sponsored by Fiji and Samoa and the Vienna Program of Action for Landlocked Developing Countries for the decade 2014 to 2024, sponsored by Lao People's Republic, and the implementation of the Program of Action for the least developed countries for the decade 2011 to 2020 in Asia and the Pacific, sponsored by Cambodia, and called on all member countries to support these draft resolutions. Several least developed, landlocked developing, and Pacific Island developing countries expressed their support for the draft resolutions. Madam Chair, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the summary of the deliberations of the preparatory meeting of the special body on the LDCs, LLDCs, and SEEDs, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Wangabata, for delivering the summary of the preparatory meeting to this committee. Now, let us turn to agenda item 2B, where I would like to invite His Excellency Mr. Lee Tush, Senior Minister and Chairman of the National Committee for the Economic and Social Commission of Asia and the Pacific to Cambodia, to present the highlights of the outcome of the high-level policy dialogue on the implementation of the Istanbul Program of Action for LDCs. Your Excellency, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Before I speak, I have got something important to say. I was told to be brief, to be accurate, and to be seated. I promise I will be as brief as possible, no matter how long it will take. Madam Chair, Madam Executive Secretary, Honorable Presidents, Prime Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, my country has nominated me, our ambassador, and other colleagues as representatives of our government to bring to your high attention the report on the Siem Reap Angkor outcome document. This is an honor for me to speak before all distinguished delegates. Today it marks another milestone in the graduation process in our region. Without doubt, we can all acknowledge the significance of this important meeting. We have gathered here from all corners of our region to show our commitments that will stand the test of our time and to continue our journey. On this occasion, I wish to express my government's appreciation on the initiative taken by ESCAP Secretariat to organize the regional meeting in December 2011 to adopt the resolution 68 on the implementation of the Program of Action for Least Developed Countries for the decade 2011-2020 in Asia-Pacific region, in which it requested the Executive Secretary to assist the Asia-Pacific LDCs in implementing the regional roadmap for the decade and to convene the Asia-Pacific regional meeting on the implementation of Istanbul Program of Action, which was held in Siem Reap, Cambodia in December 2012. My government also acknowledges the initiative taken by ESCAP Secretary to adopt the resolution 73 resulting the organization of the Asia-Pacific Regional High-Level Policy Dialogue in Siem Reap, Cambodia in March 2015, which adopted the Siem Reap Angkor outcome document. My government would also like to extend our appreciation to those countries that attended the meeting. Honorable delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is now truly a gracious honor for me to present the highlights of the Siem Reap Angkor outcome document as follows. ESCAP and the Royal Government of Cambodia organized the high-level Asia-Pacific Policy Dialogue on the implementation of Istanbul Program of Action for Least Developed Countries for the decade 2011-2020 in Siem Reap, Cambodia from 4 to 6 March 2015. The meeting was organized as a response to the ESCAP Resolution 73 that requested the Executive Secretary to organize the Asia-Pacific Regional High-Level Policy Dialogue on the IPOA in earlier 2015, and to submit the Commission at its 71st session a report on progress achieved in implementing the said resolution. The meeting adopted the Siem Reap Angkor outcome document, which has been transmitted by the government of Cambodia to the 71st session of the Commission as a basic for the midterm review of the IPOA by the Commission. All ESCAP members were invited to the meeting, which was attended by 22 participants, including ministers and senior government officials and other stakeholders from 14 countries, namely Afghanistan, Australia, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Cambodia, Kiribati, the Lao People's Democratic Republic, Nepal, Myanmar, the Russian Federation, some Solomon Islands, Thailand, Tuvalu, and Vanuatu. The meetings emphasized that LDCs, development partners, and the UN system must make the commitments and implement the actions agreed in the IPOA, including those related to mobilizing financial resources for development and capacity building. Madam Chair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, for LDCs, more specifically, LDCs are encouraged to formulate comprehensive strategies for meeting IPOA goals in accordance with their national plans and priorities, and with support of the UN system and development partners. Formulate strategies for increasing economic productivity and diversification, addressing cross-sectoral constraints such as infrastructure, human capital, supportive regulations, and taxation policies, and activation of key markets. Continue to invest in improving education and health to prepare their population to take the development opportunities when they arise. Use available resources, including ODA, in areas that have direct impact on sustainable development and LDC graduation. Continue sharing their experiences, including after graduation, in formulating and implementing strategies for closing their graduation gaps. For development partners, the meeting encouraged development partners to meet their ODA commitments, including commitments to achieve targets of 0.15% to 0.2% of GNP for ODA to LDCs, in accordance with IPOA. Take into account the LDC graduation criteria in allocation of ODA to allow for proper alignment of ODA with the evolving needs of LDCs and to avoid sudden changes in ODA flows when countries graduate. Assist LDCs, including after graduation, in mobilizing concessional resources for the implementation of climate change adaptation measures. Provide full, free, duty-free, and quota-free market access to all products from all LDCs for promotion of exports and increase the share of LDCs in world trade. Adopt transparent, simple, and harmonized rules of origin for imports from LDCs and special support measures for LDCs to fully benefit from regional economic cooperation and integration. Continue to support LDCs after graduation, considering the evolving needs and capacities of graduated countries. Recognize and use for operational purposes the LDC category and criteria to increase coherence of international supports towards the LDCs and expedite implementation of IPOA. For the United Nations system, the meeting also recommended that the ESCAP should provide a standing graduation and transition. Graduation indicators monitoring framework. UN should involve the LDCs more closely in the formulation and monitoring of graduation criteria and indicators. ESCAP should continue to promote sharing of its knowledge and experiences and distribution of good practices in developing and implementing strategies for LDC's implementations of the IPOA and graduation on a sustainable basis. UN system, especially OHRLLS, was encouraged to operationalize the UN Technology Bank for the LDCs as early as possible and coordinate with development partners to pursue the establishment of UN Secretary General's proposed UN International Center for Investment Promotion for least developed countries. The UN system, including ESCAP, ITC, and UNTAD, were encouraged to work with LDCs to build their productive capacity, including in areas of trade facilitation, supply chain development services, agro-processing, and private sector competitiveness. Madam Chair, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, the Siem Reap Angkor outcome document presents new perspectives, approaches, and policy guidance which will help accelerating and advancing implementation of IPOA. Let us thoroughly embrace the ideas and policy guidance that are exchanged and actively engaged in every moment of the utmost importance, using our prodigious efforts and commitments. The outcome document also emphasizes the needs for strong commitments and leadership for the successful implementation of IPOA. I wholeheartedly urge you to take action on the adopted recommendations from outcome document to establish the momentum for national growth in our region. Last but not least, we are here for a common goal, and we strongly believe that this outcome document will produce a framework encouraging policy recommendations which promote the implementations and the shaping of future graduation. In conclusion, I wish to express our profound gratitude to Madam Shamsha, Under Secretary General of the United Nations and Executive Secretary of ESCAP, for her dynamism and leadership, for bringing the Asia-Pacific region together in support of an inclusive and shared prosperity. We also express our sincere appreciation to the UN family and development partners for the commitments and cooperation. Madam Chair, I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Mr. Tush, for sharing the highlights of the outcome of the high-level policy dialogue on the implementation of the Istanbul Program of Action. That was actually very concise, sir. For item 2C, I now invite His Excellency, Mr. Sonam Tobden Rabgye, representative of the Prime Minister of Bhutan, to present the highlights of the outcome of the second United Nations Conference on Landlocked Developing Countries. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Executive Secretary, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor for me to present the important features of the second UN Conference on Landlocked Developing Countries held in Vienna in November 2014, where heads of state and government and representatives of many countries adopted the Vienna Program of Action for the Landlocked Developing Countries for the decade 2014-2024. The Vienna Program of Action for LLDCs emphasizes 6 priority areas, namely 1, fundamental transit policy issues, 2, infrastructure development and maintenance, transport, energy, information and communications and technology infrastructure, 3, international trade and trade facilitation, 4, regional integration and cooperation, 5, structural economic transformation and means of implementation. These priority areas are aimed to develop and expand an efficient transit systems and transport development, enhance competitiveness, expand trade, structural transformation, regional cooperation, and promote inclusive economic growth and sustainable development. These in turn will help to reduce poverty, build resilience, bridge economic and social gaps, and ultimately help transform those countries into land-linked countries. Madam Chair, since the adoption of the Almaty Program of Action addressing the special needs of landlocked developing countries within a new global framework of transport cooperation for landlocked and transit developing countries, and with the unhindered feasibility support of transit countries, landlocked developing countries have made considerable economic progress. The Vienna Program of Action comes at a time of a major transition from the Almaty Program of Action, and as we shift gears from the MDGs to post-2015 development agenda. It will require concrete actions in a number of interrelated areas in order to supplement the Almaty Program of Action. Therefore, the overarching goal of the new Program of Action is to continue addressing the special development needs and challenges of landlocked developing countries in a more coherent manner so that it will lead to an enhanced rate of sustainable and inclusive growth, which can contribute to the eradication of poverty by moving towards the goal of ending extreme poverty. The specific goals and objectives contained in the Vienna Program of Action are to promote unfettered, efficient, and cost-effective access to and from sea by all means of transport on the basis of freedom of transit and other related measures in accordance with applicable rules of international law. Reduce trade transaction costs and transport costs, and improve international trade services through simplification and standardization of rules and regulations so as to increase the competitiveness of exports of landlocked developing countries and reduce costs of imports, thereby contributing to the promotion of rapid and inclusive economic development. Develop adequate transport infrastructure networks and complete missing links connecting landlocked developing countries. Effectively implement bilateral and regional and international legal instruments and strengthen regional integration. Promote growth and increase participation in global trade through structural transformation related to enhanced productive capacity development, value addition, diversification, and reduction of dependency on commodities, and finally, enhance and strengthen international support for landlocked developing countries to address the needs and challenges arising from being landlocked in order to eradicate poverty and promote sustainable development. Madam Chair, the Vienna Program of Action is based on renewed and strengthened partnership between landlocked developing countries, transit countries, and development partners within the context of South-South and triangular cooperation in harnessing benefits from international trade, structurally transforming their economies, and achieving more inclusive and sustainable growth. Strengthen partnerships with relevant international and regional organizations and between public and private sectors are also essential parts of the Vienna Program of Action. The Vienna Program of Action highlights 5 main areas of support for landlocked developing countries from regional commissions: monitoring and review of the implementation of the Vienna Program of Action through existing intergovernmental processes at sub-regional and regional levels, building the capacity of landlocked developing countries in the implementation of the Vienna Program of Action in a well-coordinated and coherent manner, inviting regional and sub-regional organizations to mainstream implementation of the Vienna Program of Action into their relevant programs, submitting analytical reports on the implementation of the Vienna Program of Action, and in that regard, inviting regional and sub-regional organizations and the private sector to be actively involved in the sessions of the Commission. Madam Chair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the regional roadmap, which is being proposed in ESCAP document E/ESCAP/7/2, named ESCAP Support for Implementation of the Vienna Program of Action for Landlocked Developing Countries, contains a set of capacity development activities aimed at delivering knowledge products, dissemination, advocacy, expert services, reviews, monitoring, and evaluation, and provides a basis for formulating technical assistance programs and projects at regional, sub-regional, and national levels. It identifies agencies and entities that could be involved in delivering these products and services at regional, sub-regional, and regional levels. In conclusion, I would like to stress that the landlocked developing countries of the region will require increased international assistance and transit partner support in their development process in order to address the special and unique challenges that they face. In this regard, ESCAP could work closely with all relevant organizations and development partners, as well as the private sector, to implement the Vienna Program of Action in a coordinated, coherent, and expeditious manner in our countries. Thank you, and I wish you every success in your deliberations.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for sharing the highlights of the outcome of the second United Nations Conference on LDCs. Now, I would like to open the floor for the delegates for their statements on Agenda Item 2, Special Body on Least Developed, Landlocked Developing, and Pacific Island Developing Countries. I would like to ask the distinguished delegates to confine their statements to this agenda item and limit each statement to no more than 5 minutes. And I was also informed that our interpreters will be taking a break soon. So with your indulgence, can you please make your statement in English? So I see that none of the delegates would wish to take the floor. So once again, this special body extends sincere appreciation to the Pacific leaders and the distinguished member of the LDCs and LLDC groups for their contribution and insightful recommendations. So the outcomes that we've heard and the insights we've heard from the leaders will provide valuable guidance to the Secretariat in designing its work program in support of the countries with special needs. And I take this opportunity to extend my sincere appreciation to the Executive Secretary in organizing this high-level exchange, and since it provided a unique opportunity to listen to the Pacific leaders and gain deeper understanding about the developing challenges faced by this group of countries. Now, as a matter of procedure, since the special body considered yesterday the summary of the Asia-Pacific countries with special needs development report as contained in document E/ESCAP/71/39, I would like to propose that the committee recommend to the Commission to take note of this document. It is agreed. So this concludes our consideration of Agenda Item 2 on the Special Body on Least Developed, Landlocked Developing, and Pacific Island Developing Countries. At this time, I would like to give the floor to the Secretary for some administrative and housekeeping announcements. You have the floor, Mr. Paul.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Secretariat would like to make the following announcement. In accordance with Conference Bulletin Number 2, the Secretariat closed nominations for candidates for the election to new governing councils of APCICT, CAPSA, and CSAM at noon on Tuesday, 26 May. Based on the nominations received, there will be no elections for the governing bodies of CAPSA and CSAM. However, there will be an election for the Governing Council of APCICT. All member governments present at the sessions are invited to cast a vote at any time between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. on Thursday, 28 May. For more details, please refer to Conference Bulletin number 3 at the Commission website, www.unescap.org/Commission. The opening session of the ministerial segment of the Commission will start at 8:50 a.m. tomorrow. All delegates are requested to be seated by 8:40 a.m. Country statements on agenda item 9A will be delivered in the afternoon of Thursday from 2:45 p.m. to 5 p.m. and on Friday from 10:30 a.m. to 12 noon and from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Order of speaking is member states followed by associate members and then UN bodies. Kindly register the intention to deliver a statement during the ministerial segment with the conference officer in UN ESCAP Hall. There will be a special luncheon event, G20 Antalya Summit Perspective from Asia and the Pacific, at the reception hall on the ground floor of the UNCC. The Executive Secretary, as the UN G20 Sherpa, will provide an opening remarks, and the Turkish G20 Sherpa will also be providing the keynote address. All delegates and participants are invited. In the afternoon, the government of Pakistan is hosting a side event, Prosperity Through Regional Trade and Transport Connectivity, from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. at Conference Room 4, located at the level 1 of the UNCC. Furthermore, the governments of Bangladesh, the Russian Federation, and Thailand are also organizing side events on a number of pertinent issues. You can find details of these and other events on the Commission website, www.unescap.org/Commission. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the Secretariat. If there are no comments, I now declare this meeting adjourned.